Hey everyone, welcome to the Ember.js Meetup. Before we start the show, I have a few brief words from our sponsors at Avalara. So take it away, Mark.
Hello, good evening. My name is Mark Jansen. I'm the VP of Engineering here at Avalara. And we have a long history with Ember here at Avalara. So when I started 5+ years ago, Avalara's entire engineering department was on the 3rd floor of Pier 55 down there by the Ferris wheel, in the top third of the building. We were all crowded in there. And in 2012, just before that, the very first ever Ember.js Meetup in Seattle was in that space. 2 Avalara employees started that and got it going. That interest led to Avalara developing some products with Ember. And I'm pleased to say our flagship product, AvaTax, which built this building, 82% of the users of AvaTax today use an Ember-based product to access AvaTax. So big influence that came directly from that meetup in 2012. And so Ember's been a big part of our UI journey here at Avalara. I'm pleased to have you all here tonight. Welcome. We are also hiring, so that's my commercial part of the message. And we want to welcome you all to Avalara. Enjoy our tiki bar.
Thank you. And just remember, Ember cannot just build websites, ambitious websites. It can build ambitious buildings. So first off, who am I? There are 2 things that you should know about me. Well, maybe 3 things. My name is Paul Watts. 1, I look a lot younger without a beard. And 2, I don't often take selfies, but when I do, they're in front of space planes. One thing you should know is we have a code of conduct. Basically, it says be awesome to each other, be welcoming, be inclusive, that sort of thing. Just don't be mean. We also have the Ember community at large, and the Ember Seattle as well is on Discord, so you can follow this link. There's a link to our Discord community. You can get an invite and show up there, and most of us are on there. And if you want to actually have some questions about Ember, feel free to ask. We are open to questions. Finally, this is something that I like to follow when you're kind of out and about and you're milling and networking and things like that. How many of you heard of the Pac-Man rule? No? Okay, cool, 1 person has known. Well, everybody's gonna learn something. So if you're in a group, if you're in a networking group, and rather than actually having everybody in a circle, be like Pac-Man and just like open up a space. So that allows somebody who wants to join that conversation to kind of come into that conversation. And when they do, say, hey, how's it going? And then open up a little bit more space. So be like Pac-Man and welcome people into your conversation. So again, we're always looking for speakers. If you're new to Ember, if you're old to Ember, if you're anywhere in between, something that you want to share, always looking for some folks who can actually give some talks. So if you're interested, ping us on Meetup page, ping us on Discord, whatever. Okay. And again, thanks to Avalara. Without this, this is a cool space. Enjoy the view, enjoy the talks. Okay, that is it for me. So the first talk, where's Jake? Where'd he go? Okay. The first talk is from Avalara's own Jake Bixby and Ember.js Meetup's own Jake Bixby, talking about Ember route actions.
There we go. All right. Bert, can you hear me? Let me use a microphone. Thanks, Dave. Hello. Can you hear me now? Awesome. I am Jake Bixby, and I'm going to speak about the Ember Route Action Helper as sort of a case study in community solutions. I'm a senior engineer here at Avalara. I've been here for about a year. I am a Ember CLI core team alumnus, no longer on the team. Lots of stuff in my family. I am an amateur macro photographer, and I enjoy balancing food on my dog's head. It's my quirky Gus and Stanley, his brother. I also take a lot of pictures of flowers and little things. So why am I talking about this? I saw something in the ecosystem that I wanted to highlight. I think Ember is pretty unique, and I don't think this would have happened in another framework. I've seen a lot of different opinions on this specific add-on, and its use over time. It's been around for about 3 years now. I've used it personally in 2 different places. I used to work at classbase.com, we used it there, and we use it here actually pretty heavily. And I just needed a topic. It seemed good. So what did I see? First of all, Ember has changed a lot over the time of it. We went from bind-adder to HTML bars, from views to components, iterated through a few different routers. Ember has changed. Like, if you were to show me Ember from now to where it was 5 years ago when I started, Ember is extremely adept at spotting good ideas and adopting them. It has stolen really good ideas, and it's not ashamed about it. I think that's awesome. The process and tooling that Ember employs is extremely unique in the JavaScript ecosystem. Even missteps, they actually usually course correct pretty well. And this is kind of what this is going to be about. So the case study. I am of the opinion that the Ember Route Action Helper exemplifies how this process works for the community. So let's take a look at it. So if anybody's not familiar, the Ember Route Action Helper is an add-on that was created basically in preparation for router components. There was a RFC that came about in it was 2015, and shortly after that RFC, this add-on came about to help facilitate that. It provides a closure action style helper that basically the previous model used bubbling, action bubbling, and you couldn't. We're dealing with a sort of thing that was not easily passed around. You didn't have a return value. It also was made to completely circumvent the whole need for controllers as far as that goes, because they were going to go away. So previously, you would have to do something where you have your in your template, you've got this login action, and this is using the then new, like brand new closure action syntax. You basically have your template that's found in your controller, which will call that action, then call send inside of your controller action to bubble it up through your route. And that bubbling could basically continue all the way up to your application route if you had like a global action, for instance. So after the controller is gone, you can then use this route action helper. And the other benefit is you can use it in a closure action style where you basically get a return value, which gives you a function that you can pass around, query, etc. So why was it created? As I mentioned, it was essentially a stopgap. It was just, we knew this thing was coming. We wanted to be prepared for it, so anybody who was adopting could be ready and just basically do a search and replace with route action and drop route, and you just have your action good to go. It was intended to simplify the programming model by just circumventing controllers, like I mentioned that. And then applying the closure action to route actions, you get that nice querying and return value. So also the existing route action and controller action model used mixin that just was extremely confusing. There were a few different iterations over that period of time. It's very good. So previously, action bubbling. This is actually straight out of the guides. You click your action, it would be bound to your controller. Hit that controller, the action will go up. So controller's gone. You would basically hit the new router service. A router service would essentially hit all of the routes, checking the actions hash to see if it had your action that you're looking for. And so that was bubbling. Was not exactly bubbling. So they leveraged a brand new thing at that time, which was the router service. It basically allowed you to reach that state from anywhere in your application. The helper, as I mentioned, essentially just walks through those active routes until it finds a match, and if it didn't throw a match. The helper returning that function basically gives you the power of closure action. So you can pass that down, yield it, use it inside of components that are further down the chain. And the major benefit is it didn't interfere with the old model. Adoption could be incremental. You could do a few different applications throughout your application. So what went wrong? That all sounded pretty good, right? Well, routable components were canceled in January 2018. Don't ask Yehuda about it. He wrote a really good post about that in the RFC, so I think that's all handled. So when used without restraint, anti-patterns emerged. It was very easy to just completely lose focus of where your actual action lived. So you'd have this action that you're basically dealing with, but you'd have to go through your entire, unless you use proper naming, you have to search through to find out exactly where that action lived. When used with restraint, there was still room for poor developer economics. And it was still pretty heavily tied to build action level. So the good, it gives you basically the ability to use low level actions. So if you have like a login action that you don't want to have to re-implement, either using a mix-in or some other pattern that causes you to basically abstract away. You generally have your state and your actual action in one place where you know where it lives, you can find it. Generally a good pattern. Being that it avoids the use of controllers, there's prepared for the future. And abstracting the route as closure actions, get that power of being able to handle it as just a function instead of having to worry about send action and bubbling. And just it's a mess. I actually had to look a lot of this up because I completely purged it from my brain. So the bad, I think I mentioned above, abstracts route level actions as closure actions. Well, abstracting route level actions as closure actions sometimes obscures your source. You can't find it sometimes because somebody either renamed it. Route bubbling means you have to track your action down sometimes. Not great developer economics. And routes intentionally don't state. So you have to use controller for or use misuse state services to gain access to state. Just ran into several issues over time where that was just a big problem. And as I mentioned, routes don't own state, and you're basically mutating where it's not owned. So, so the ugly abstracts route level actions as closure actions, which you basically rename it to something entirely different and good luck finding where that action actually lives. There's been several times where I throw my hands up and just go take a walk. Using component templates, you can end up with something where you basically have something that's actually very tightly entangled, and it lives 10 levels deep inside of a component, inside of a nested route, and you have to track down where that is. Using it inside of an add-on, I experienced this where it was used inside of an add-on where you basically had to essentially, anywhere it was used, you had to make sure that you had a route action that could support that action. Additionally, in setup for tests, you had to set that every single time in every single test itself. And then action naming collisions. You end up with something where you name something, an action, you use the same name in a child route. That child route just stole your, basically intercepted your action. Just a lot of just WTF moments. So quick timeline, just to kind of recap. So in May 2014, the approved actions RFC came about. Routable components were then RFC'd in 2015. So almost immediately after the closure actions were introduced, closure actions were introduced. In late 2015, Robert Jackson kind of noticed that this was kind of an issue and made a JS bin. That JS bin was then turned into a add-on and released to the public in February. Community adopted for 2 years. The routable components RFC closes in January of 2018. And the Dockyard, rightly so, closed that, basically said, don't use this action, or don't use this action. It's basically an end. Route action RFC was opened in October 2018 because there were people that were still using the pattern. They found benefit from it. They were using it responsibly, and they wanted to bring it into the application. Into the framework. But after 3 months of comments and information gathering, people decided after the face-to-face, they decided to close the RFC because of some of the things that I stated. So what now? I actually was asking a few people around the community, basically, if you are using pre 3.4, continue to use controllers and just use it sparingly if you have to use the right action. Avoid using it in component templates. Be mindful of your renaming issues. And if you're using 3.4 or higher, you can actually use something that is a guaranteed good pattern. I checked with about 4 or 5 people using the decorators polyfill to use the action decorator. So you can use the action decorator on a service, which is something that previously couldn't do because we depended on the actions hash to hold actions, basically to bind that state for you. So using the action decorator plus the action service, service decorator, you can explicitly refer to your action instead of just hoping it's somewhere in your route manager. You actually get to bring that service in and tie that action directly to it. Because essentially all it's doing is it's binding this so you have your scope directly in your service. So here we have an off service that just pulls in the, so it's using the service decorator to pull in the router. It's using the action decorator, which basically takes that login function, calling it a action where it's bound to that scope. And then you can use the router service to transition. So then in your, you've got like a login button that implements this. You just drop in your off service, and directly in your implementation, you can just say drop this auth login as your function. So this is using the function helper, which is actually pretty new. It's part of Octane, but it essentially just calls the function without doing any binding. They're actually trying to move away from using the action helper inside of templates, and yeah, I'm not going to go too much into that because that's a whole big discussion. So basically, by simplifying the action system, you can do away with a lot of the bookends that were around for that. So essentially, you're using one pattern for actions. You're just using the action decorator, binding it to the scope where it's used. You can drop the old actions hash. Generally, I think we need to drop the old actions hash system. It carries a lot of cruft, a lot of stuff that's been built up over the years, and pretty difficult. The action decorator, I think, is really the best path for that. It's very simple, just binds the context. And then we'll also need to deal with the naming baggage. Using the function helper will help fix that, but basically there was sort of a dual purpose of the action helper where it can be used as essentially a element modifier, or you can use it as just a helper. So that, along with embracing a simpler model, dropping controllers entirely. Essentially, once query params are in a service or on the route or something like that, we can just get rid of. And moving towards a more modern service plus component framework. Maybe we still need routes. I think we do. But using something where you essentially have focused routes, where it's very minimally processing, handling specific things that are route specific, like getting your state and making sure that you have your state before you proceed, or redirection. And then the action decorator, it's a really simple, explicit solution. I think it's going to help a lot of people simplify all those really complex things that they had to do. So to recap, the route action helper was created in 2016 to prepare for the routable components. Gained popularity because it was basically seen as the way forward. Enabled semantic patterns, and in 2018, when that was canceled, I think the community did the right thing by just saying, "Hey, don't use this add-on." So also, there's a better way. Use the action decorator. So that is not actually on my talk. I've got a second talk. It's a talk within a talk. I really wanted to kind of emphasize that the whole process was basically enabled by the framework that Ember provides for itself. So here's my little intro. Gus and I worked a lot on balancing things for a while. Kind of stopped after we got Stanley, but it's a good one. And I just take too many damn pictures of flowers my wife would say. So Ember just has an amazing framework for development itself. I don't think you can really say that for a lot of other frameworks. So, what are some of the components of this meta framework? Specifically, I think the biggest one is the RFC process. The add-on system basically enabled that entire thing that we just talked about, where you basically have a solution that the community wants to bring it in through an add-on. The emphasis on primitives, I think, is really key for Ember, and Yehuda has been doing a lot with TC39, moving a lot of things forward. I think Ember is really good to be focused on those areas. Ember, I don't know if there's any other framework that specifically has a steering committee like Ember. The steering committee just recently put out the request for blog posts, and they basically use that to decide what they're going to work on for the rest of the next year. And actually, one other thing, I was listening to the Ember Map blog, podcast. They were saying how the Ember, they were saying how the Ember add-on import, Ember auto import was basically a direct response to the request for blog posts. It was like one of the #1 pain points. So they listen. I think community involvement is really key. Ember really takes an incremental approach, which I think is really valuable. Deprecations. Ember learned a lot with the 1.0 upgrade. There was a whole lot that I think Ember has basically gained from having that deprecation system. Experimentation really relies on add-ons. The release train, you have a consistent, known release that's going to come out over time. Additions, this new thing, newfangled thing where you're releasing entirely new features without actually changing card versions, I think is really amazing. And more. So some key components from the last talk. The RFC process, I think, was probably one of the biggest ones. The add-on system enabled the entire thing. And primitives allowed the add-on builders to essentially build the add-on. Being able to access a lot of what was done through an add-on is really powerful, and that enables experimentation. So a gap in the framework. It was filled with an opt-in, minimally invasive, easily code-modded solution. I haven't seen that in a lot of places. Experimentation through an add-on, basically, that experimentation, it was with an add-on, it was safe because it was not adopted into the framework. So, you have unforeseen patterns, you can do experimentation, you can test out adoption, and the community can help find those solutions to, determine whether it's a good fit. Through slightly related change in direction, the add-on was made less optimal. So I would argue that the process worked. Eventually, which has improved the process by making the scoping of those RFCs a bit tighter, so they don't last for 2 years. I think they learned a lot from that. So with RFCs, Ember adopted the request for comments process from REST in late 2014. They were pretty much the second framework I think that adopted the process, and it's gone. Like a lot of frameworks bring it in. It's basically been pretty much the reason Ember's been able to grow the way that it does. I think pretty much every single feature of Octane has been brought in through RFCs. RFCs have also, identified some possibly excellent ideas. Those ideas wouldn't have figured out that it was actually a bad idea without being able to have this RFC process. Rejected RFCs. If you look through, there are way more rejected RFCs than there are accepted ones. But I think the benefit of that is you can learn from those rejections. Knowing that ideas are discussed carefully before adoption gives me confidence in the framework. And just the fact that it's become a standard for many projects, React adopted it, Vue adopted it. There's quite a few others that have basically brought that in. Oh, why am I on the? That's what's going on. Sorry. Okay. Add-ons. Basically, add-ons, you can usually do almost anything with an add-on. Because of Ember CLI's build system, you can do things with your build pipeline, there's hooks that are provided. You can bring in pretty much whatever you want into an application. You can use them for, they're used for engines, they're used for everything. In fact, Ember core itself is an add-on. So yeah, they're extremely powerful. They allow experimentation, adoption, and incremental adoption, I think, is really key. There are just not a lot of easy ways to do that with a large framework like this. They help backport. So there's a lot of stuff that was brought in through Octane where they just drop an add-on, you bring it in, you can get this brand new feature. Like we're using angle bracket components in Ember 3.0, and it's great. So I think that's really, really powerful. And the fact that they're used, actually, Ember CLI itself consumes add-ons. Ember CLI consumes add-ons. Ember itself is an add-on. Ember Data is an add-on. It just add-ons all the time. Primitives. Ember has really aimed to provide those strong primitives, starting with RSVP, where we basically help shape promises. The whole stuff with decorators. And I think that as we continue to move towards native solutions, we're going to see more. So as far as evolution, the cycle of discussion, refinement, experimentation, and adoption, I think that is how Ember is going to just stay relevant. I think that Ember basically, it doesn't leave anybody behind. It doesn't do big bang regrets. It is a smooth, steady, reliable framework that I think it's proved itself a few times over on. The entirety of the Octane feature set went through this process on polyfills to help. And I think that the fact that you can take a 5-year-old application and bring it all the way up to a Canary app is not something you can say for a lot of other frameworks. And yeah, I think this is just basically how Ember is going to stay relevant. It's borrowing and just improving upon good ideas. I think it's a great framework. Thanks, Yehuda. And that is it. Anybody have any questions or anything? Brent?
Do you have any advice for migrating away from route actions? Do you have a lot of
Well, what version of Ember are you on? Use the decorator polyfill. Just bring in the decorator polyfill and throw those actions. So it depends if those actions are things that need to be global. I mean, is the reason, are you basically trying to reach up through from your component to sort of circumvent things, or?
We just basically, we adopted it because we thought controls were going away.
Yeah.
So we wanted to,
Well, controllers are still going away. And there's definitely a push for that. In fact, there was a RFC that just came out last week that I think Nullbox Populi put out. And he actually, I think, has some stuff in there as far as migrating away from the controllers. But I would absolutely recommend this path of using services plus the action decorator. It's really powerful. It allows you to just directly reach and use your action exactly where it lives. There's no ambiguity about it. You don't have to worry about the whole bubbling process. It just works. So yeah, I think depending on the specific type of action that you're dealing with, I think that is going to be your go-to for most cases. Anything else? Okay. Cool. All right. That's it.
So So we're going to take about a 5 or 10 minute break, and then we will be back with Yehuda Katz. Stay tuned.
Sorry. Alright, so, yeah, let me, oh. Not yet. You want to take that? Did you just work? I ended up. It doesn't fit as smart. And I didn't know which. You have to use the Wi-Fi. I don't. I just oh, so you did it too. So you did the same solution. Yes. Yeah.
So I try to make sure I use it because
yeah. Exactly right.
exactly.
I was wondering, my concern was like most of it just after a pass.
That's the guys, so they said it is working on every test. They said if it doesn't come up with a password, then we don't. I have no idea.
Saturday is not one thing. Sunday we're doing a picnic Sunday barbecue. So it starts for the whole weekend. But then Monday I go to the house.
You know what you're hunting?
I don't know. She's in the hands of.
Oh, she's over there.
She's been here all over. She's been with the.
Is she a Seattle line or something?
All right, 2-minute warning.
No. I asked the guy, so it's meant to be have a lyric again. But it doesn't prompt. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, you just totally
What?
you maybe didn't agree deal.
Yeah.
It's just and they probably just wanted when it just went to sleep. It cut out when it went to sleep or something like that. I don't know why it cut out. But it just
I don't know. I know it's actually not.
barely water.
Sorry.
That came unplugged. I saw that fall. It's that particular cable.
Oh. Thank you. Alright, what do we got?
Is it on? I think it's off. It wasn't.
Here, you turn it on. Yeah.
It must have taken you go to the show about the
Icon.
It's not full screen. Yeah, I'll do that.
Oh yeah, and by for technical guys. All right, let's get started. So our next guest needs no introduction. He was a member of the jQuery core team, Ruby on Rails core team. If you're a fan of Rust, he created Cargo, right? And also created co-creator of Ember.js. So let's welcome Yehuda Katz.
Thank you. So the previous talk was really great, and I always like when people talk about Ember the way I want people to think about Ember. So it feels good. It's not a joke. That's a genuine thing. But one thing that is kind of that always I find a struggle when talking about Ember is that when people talk about incrementalism, it sounds not only boring, which is bad enough, but also like it can't work. Like incrementalism as a concept isn't possible. Now the truth is that it's the only thing that ever works. But that said, and that's true about things like Linux and the web itself, and you can make a big list, and like modern society. But few revolutions equally. Anyway, so incrementalism works, but it's not a sexy word. It's not a word that people hear and they think, oh, I imagine that next year my life will be much better than it is now. And so, really, the point of my talk is to say that the answer to the question is no, we will not be left behind. But I want to talk about that through both talking about Octane, the thing we're working on right now, and then some of the actual details of Octane, some of the ways in which we have structured Octane. Now, I'm not going to reiterate all the
really good meta details that the previous talk covered. Those are all, in fact, ways that we do things incrementally. But I do want to talk about, now that we're in the event horizon, we're in the final moments before Octane, it's a good time to sort of see how everything, how the finish line is crossed. It's a good time to see how the incrementalism lines up with something that is, in fact, not so incremental in feeling. Right? So that's what I've always found interesting as a, I worked on Rails 3 a long time ago, which was a big deal. And I would say that was a little incremental, but probably not enough for my taste these days, like 10 years later. And Ember, I sort of made my mission to make things as incremental as we could. And a big part of what I have enjoyed about working on it is that we did things like Glimmer and Glimmer 2, which were complete rewrites of the entire view layer, the entire engine. We I think innovated in that space. And we did that for the most part without breaking these types. And so, for example, I work on an app called Skylight that has been around since the first days of Ember, and today is the latest version of Ember. We run our tests against the canary builds and things like that. And I think it says a lot that that's possible, that is a thing. And I'm not the only one who has that experience. I think probably a lot of people in this room do, and it's a thing people often say about it. So I want to talk about, like, we're not to throw any stones here, but we're not like Dojo or something, which is like very stable but isn't making progress, or even jQuery. Ember genuinely does make good progress, and I want to talk about that today. So first, I want to give a 10,000-foot view of how, at least how I would think about Octane. If you ask every member of the Ember core team, they'll have a different opinion on what the point is, and that's sort of what makes Ember great, actually. But I'll give you my view of it. So for me, the goal of Ember, like the reason that Ember still iterates, if you ask someone like, what's the point of Ember, and they say it's to be stable, well, in that case, what's the point of making any progress at all? Obviously, if you want maximum stability, the way to accomplish that is to not do anything at all. And so there are obviously some things that we want to make better. And for me, the thing that I most want to improve over time, the thing that animates me personally, is to make what I call the annotation burden, the amount of work that you have to do to explain to Ember what it is that you're trying to say, to make that smaller than it was before. And I hope in this talk I'll show you or convince you that there's been a lot of very significant progress on that front over the past years. But for me, that's the critical thing. And I think Octane has made some surprising breakthroughs on this front that I wasn't really expecting when we started. So when I was writing this talk, I was trying to figure out how to communicate the message that I'm about to communicate. And so I went to Code Academy, which is a website where you can learn how to program. And I just took the HTML course. And so I'm going through the HTML course. And my hypothesis going into it, I'll just jump to the punchline here, is Ember is very good at HTML. It's much better at HTML than a lot of other frameworks. So it really should be true that you can do this exact tutorial inside of Ember. And the punchline is it worked. But I just want to show you some of the details. So if you take the previous slide and you stick it in an Ember template exactly as it is, it will exactly work. I don't want to get into all the details about why that matters, but it actually turns out to be a surprising design decision that we have a rule that if you have valid HTML and you put it in Ember, it actually works. Like, that turns out to be a thing that not everyone does. And for various reasons, I would say I'm very proud of both the fact that we do this and the fact that it proves to be good. And this is not just true about little snippets. It's true about, I continued going all the way through that tutorial, and the last thing in the tutorial, which includes tables, which, if you know the DOM, can get pretty messy. It includes things like image SRC with or without the closing slash brackets, right? Like exactly what you would have copied and pasted from somebody's HTML tutorial. And I think that's a critical point. The critical point is, yes, you could say HTML is not actually that important. People are just building for the web and they can learn whatever. But the truth is that there's massive amounts of people, myself included, who came to the web as a designer, really, and know HTML, CSS, and maybe a little JavaScript. And asking them to please take a beat and learn a whole different way of expressing the same thing is not great. And so this is something that Ember has always been good at, and I want to talk a little bit about ways in which we have to do that much better. So the general principle is Ember templates are just HTML, and again, that is surprising that we're unique there, but probably unique is an overstatement. I think, like if you think about Polymer or something, Polymer is just HTML, but they're really far down on the side of the spectrum where they're really HTML, where the framework is basically not there. If you look at things that are not trying to be parsed by the browser's JavaScript HTML parser, our HTML implementations. So what? Now that I said all that, and I think like if you're an Ember user, you already know that like that's kind of true. You are used to the fact that you can go into a template and you don't have to write class name or put your string, your white space in curlies. Like those are things that other frameworks make you do. It's actually nice that that's not true about Ember. But there are some ways in which we are currently a little bit too far from what you might have in your head. What I said before, I said I want what's in my head to be what you write. And this slide shows that there are some areas where there's just a bunch of extra gunk where the thing in your head really wants to be. And what's awesome about Octane, and this is a detail that's kind of hard, I can't tweet it, but this is actually something that we originally got from React, except that the thing that you type in Ember is HTML. So in Octane, there is no longer tag name, attribute binding, class name binding. That is no longer the primary way that you make components. The primary way is using HTML syntax and HTML semantics. And that, for me, it's sort of my white whale. If you look at the Ember 2.0 RFC, which I wrote, I talked about this being true in that time frame, which I think was 2014. And it took us a lot of time to get to an implementation of. It's one of these things where the idea is not so hard to imagine, but the implementation is tricky. And doing it with, we bring everyone along the whole time is tricky. But as of Octane, the thing on the top is not a thing anymore. And I think that really gets us to a point where we can really say that anything that is talking about HTML really is HTML. And that's great. There's one other thing that I want to talk about, and I'm going to spend some time on, which is a feature called track properties. Track properties is a similar situation. You might actually already be aware, if you want, I can bring that up. Okay. You might already be aware of the track property feature, and I'll talk about it a little bit. But I want to talk about why I care about track properties and why I think it makes a big difference. And track properties, like the previous feature, matters a lot because it eliminates ways in which the thing that's in your mind is not the thing that you're thinking. And so the problem is not just there's a million different ways of doing state management. Here's yet another one. There's a very good reason why we are doing exactly what we're doing. So I want to lay out a problem statement and then walk through how one might have implemented it and how you would implement the track properties. The screen next to Ember data is just obligatory. It's legally required by the Ember system. If you ever say Ember data, you are required to communicate that you think that people might be sad about that. I'm kidding, close. But I'm using an example using Ember data in part because whenever you're using an abstraction, it's a little trickier to figure out how to work around whatever problem you might have encountered, and it's actually pretty normal for these things to happen. So let me talk about the problem, and then I'll walk through how we might solve it. So the problem is, I should say, I was pairing with my designer this week on this exact problem, and so that's why it was in my mind. This is not a totally synthetic problem. So we have a table of events. So we have in this case, we're using Airtable as our API, which I actually think is pretty cool as an aside, using Airtable as an API for Ember. So we have an events table, it's just a bunch of events. We have a bunch of speakers. So this is like a conference website. And events have many speakers. And when I was working with the designer, one of the things that we might have done is figure out how to make the has-many relationship work. But I was pairing with him on the telephone and really just wanted to get the job done. And this is actually the kind of thing that people find React to be nicer at, like just basically doing some sloppy solution to work around the problem without necessarily figuring out the right answer. And it's something that I always have, like it's a personal goal to make that kind of thing easier. So I felt good that it was easier now. But basically I could, over the telephone, I actually didn't have control, so everything I needed to type, I had to tell him over the phone, I had to dictate, and he's like still not totally fluent with JavaScript syntax. So basically, for all these reasons, I wasn't going to be doing like a deep exploration into Ember data adapters on the phone. But I wanted to get working. So basically what I decided was, okay, if I'm not going to be able to make the event.speakers work, maybe we can just have a component, which is the the event component, and we can make the event component have a getter of speakers that has the right information. How do we make them? So first of all, just to give you a visualization, this is a minimal visualization, but basically the idea is we have an event, has a name, we have a list of speakers, their IDs, and then we have a bunch of speakers, and each of them has an ID and a name attached to it. I also, for the sake of making progress, just in the model book, just find both of those chunks of data. And in this case, it was really just like half a dozen or a dozen pieces of data from your table for each of them, so it wasn't even that, right? Basically, I just got both of the pieces of data. That part was working fine, the network request was working fine, the data tab in the Ember inspector was working fine. The only issue was that, speakers is an array of strings, and we needed to get the actual speakers in the network. So I think, again, in the sense of looking at what we want, like what's in our head. So what's in our head is, we know that we have a bunch of events, so we loop over them, and then we have a component for the event, so we pass the event into there. If you're not familiar with the syntax here, this is angle bracket syntax, and I could have talked about that at length, but I think, first of all, a lot of people know it already and use it, and second of all, trying to remain a little focused on the other. So the top thing is just looping over the model and calling a component, and the second thing is some vanilla stuff like, here's my H1, I want to put the event's title in there. And then what I really would like to do in an ideal world is I would like to loop over event.speakers. And again, if the Ember data relationship was working, this would actually work. But for whatever reason, we couldn't make that work. So the problem is that this thing is an array of IDs. It's not an array of objects, so this is not important. So let's take a step back, and again, in light of the idea of what is in our head. So let's say we already know how Ember data works. We already know, and the way I was explaining to the designers, you could think of it like a spreadsheet, right? And if you actually look at the Ember data inspector, it looks like a spreadsheet. So basically, he in his head can see it's making you can see the network tab shows the JSON, and he can go into the inspector, he sees there's two tables. That's fine. And so what we need to do is we need to take the event, we need to take that array of strings, and we need to turn them into speakers. And something like this is actually approximately what you would like to say. And I put some parameters here just to, I don't think that's exactly in your head, but just to point out that there's missing pieces of data that we have to get from somewhere. Right? I could have made it global or something, but the point is there's some parameters here we need to get some. So if the first thing that you might try, and this, I'm sort of leading us down the path of building the right thing. So, I don't know if you would invent all the exact right choices out of your head. The point is, this is it's not so unreasonable. So the first thing we're going to try, we're going to make a getter called speakers, and then we're just going to basically copy and paste the thing that we have in the previous slide, the thing that we would have typed in a function and put it into the getter. But as we said before, there's a problem here, which is that we have this event, which I realized after I started writing this, is actually in the browser as a global variable. It's probably very confusing if you actually type it. And second of all, we don't have a store. So how do we get those things? So I see. So the first thing that we need to do is in Octane, the things that we saw in the template as @event are now available as this.args.event. And I don't want to go into a huge amount of detail here, but I'll just speak for myself when I say that this is one of the things that React showed us a long time ago that proves to be, for maybe less ideologically pure reasons than React will tell you, good. It's nice that when you look at some code, you know which things are coming from arguments and which things are a state. So I think, I've been using this style for a while now myself, and I think it's nice. So that's the answer to part one, is that the event is an argument, so it is in this style. And the point is that Octane arguments are explicit. You talk about them as at event in the template, and if you need them in a more rare case in the JavaScript, it's this .rr. So now the second question is, how do you get the store? And the answer to that question in Octane is that there's a syntax that you can use, that greater syntax, which is at service. So you say at service store, and then you access it on this. And I don't know what else to say about this other than to say this is syntactically pleasant. I think it's hard to imagine a much nicer syntax than this actually, and I think it was not hard for the designer to understand what was happening here. I think like you have to learn something, but it's a rather small thing. So we basically have a component now. We answered both of we took the Platonic ideal code, we copied and pasted it, and you have to make a couple of changes. One of them is the event is an argument, so we access it as an argument, and the second one is the store is a service, which is like more or less a global, but it's a better global. It's a better global, works in fast food, can be torn down, can be tested, right? So, so now we have translated into a working piece of code. So now the next thing we need to do is update the template, and basically we had said at event.speakers before, now we need to access the getter. And if you were to write this code and use it in a Octane app right now, it would work. And so first of all, that's already pretty cool. Like compared to what you would have had to do before, that's pretty darn close to the minimal thing that you could imagine typing. I think that's surprising given the emphasis on incrementalism that we have and given what it looks like in pre-Octane Ember. And I will talk a little bit more about why it's not like a leading framework soon. But there is one more problem, which is that I just made a getter here. And now what happens if event.speakers change? Like how does Ember know that it should update the list? It seems like basically how would that work? It seems totally disconnected. And that's a good question. And the truth is that before Octane, this was actually quite tricky to get right. Now, the saving grace about it is that a lot of the time, this is not going to update. So for example, in this app, the list of speakers and the list of events are not changing ever. And you could, in theory, like cache it, and you could even include in the payload if you wanted, although it's nice that like one of our employees can go into the Airtable and change it, right? But it's basically very, very consistent. It certainly doesn't change, nor do we have any facilities for updating it during the runtime. So at this point, from my designer's perspective, we're actually done, and there's nothing else to do. But if in pre-Octane, you would now have to like really think about what to do here. And I don't want to go into a lot of the details. I think there are better and worse answers to this question, but suffice it to say that it's not a trivial question. So that was that. The good news is that after Octane, we have a feature called auto track, talk about. And at first glance, it doesn't look very important, but because of auto track, there's nothing else to do there. We're done. And I remember when I think I landed auto track not this past EmberConf, but previous EmberConf. And there were two things that people said about auto track when I originally landed it, talking about it at EmberConf. The first thing that people said was, "I don't understand why this is important." Hopefully, I will beat the dead horse here in a minute, reiterate why I think it's important. But second of all, for people who kind of understood why it was important, there was also a common sentiment of like, this seems impossible. And what I liked, the first implementation that I did actually did work. And if we could start from scratch, a whole new framework from scratch, and didn't have to interact with any old code, it would have been a good enough implementation. A lot of the intervening time has been just making it work with other parts of the system. So like maybe somebody has a compute property that somebody observes or something, and maybe you want to migrate a piece of that to an auto track system. That's very complicated, and it's not your job to understand how that works. And but if it doesn't work in some way, if it doesn't work with some description or some migration strategy, what will happen is that everybody who's using those features right now will literally be unable to upgrade, and then we will not have accomplished the goal that we set. So even though we might have technically made it compatible, the fact that nobody would be able to use the feature unless they built a brand new app would have made it not very interesting that it was technically compatible. So the feature has been behind the flags for a while, and only very recently have we gotten to the point where the feature is usable by real apps that have migrations to do. And that, my friends, is the point of additions. I'm going to take a little divergence that was not in my speaker notes or my slides. The point of additions is basically to say this feature exists, and maybe in theory you could build a new app with it, that would work. But there's a lot of work to do that most people shouldn't have to think about for it to really be a usable thing that you would like go to your team and say, hey, I think we should use this, and not feel like, oh shit, if I'm wrong, then it's going to be very embarrassing, right? Like I take it as my personal job to have your back as a person taking a feature that I built and ask the team to use it. Because basically, if you do that a few times and it ends up being a bad idea, people will stop trusting you, and then you will no longer be a very useful app. So that's, I guess, the simple version. But the point is that the reason we realized we needed additions is because we realized that just saying that we have features and that they're technically compatible, and maybe there's a hypothetical migration idea that we have in our head, that wasn't actually getting the job done in terms of people being able to bring the features to their companies and use them. And so the point of additions is, in a weird way, and that's surprising that you need it in some abstract sense. It's a way of just us saying, yes, we're really done now. Here's a list of features, and we're pretty sure that you can use them. And not just that they work, not just for new code, not just that we think they're probably okay, but that we're like, we think it's good to use. Again, it's weird that you need to say it, but if you think about it. So the cool thing about this feature is you can just use a getter, and it just works. And actually, this thing is a thing that I still can't quite figure out how to like express my enthusiasm for it. But one thing that's awesome about getting to a point where you don't have to annotate every piece of computation that happens to be in the tracking system, which is what computer properties have to do. And actually, what earlier versions of the track system required some version of that, and there are things in the React ecosystem that work like the track system, and they require you to mark the getters as being tracked. One thing that's great about not having to do that is that it doesn't actually matter where you put the computation. You can basically break apart your computation however you would want to, in other methods, in other classes, in other functions, and as long as it will basically continue working because you never have to say anything in the first place. And again, I just think it's great to get to a point. This is what I meant by annotation burden. There's just no annotation burden here beyond what you would have thought to write in your head in the first place, and that allows you to do a lot better refactoring. So that worked because I did a little bit of hand waving there. That worked because the Ember data code that we're talking to is already operating in the track system. It does not turn out to need to rewrite itself. The existing system that it's using works fine, but you might be wondering, it seems like it cannot literally be the case that you don't have to write anything ever. You must have to write something somewhere because at some point you mutated something and we have to know that. So what is the real minimal thing that you have to say in new code? So in order to talk about that, I feel like Rachel Madison. Very long. So I want to explain. So first I explain like why auto-track is good when you're just talking about using a library, and now I want to talk about why auto-track is good when you're talking about your own code. So the problem description here is I have an events table just like before, and I want to write a component that takes a list of events. I changed the example so it doesn't take a pattern anymore. So it takes a list of events and has an input box. You type in the input box, and then it filters the list based on what you type in the input box. And additionally, unlike the previous example, or more explicitly in this example, when the list of underlying events updates in Ember data, I want the filter to update as well. So just being clear that I have a complete example here. I want to make it really well. So what we're trying to do again in our head is we have a component which is a filterable events component. We give it a list that we got from the server, and then we have an input box. We want to, whenever we type in the input box, it updates the filter pattern, and then we loop over filtered events, which we have to create somehow, and for each one we print out the name. So I think people have probably written something approximately like this before many times. So just to explain, this .filter pattern is a piece of local state, right? It's a piece of state that's only the component, it's not passed in. In Octane, if it was passed in, it would have said at filter pattern. So that's also like a generally nice thing about Octane. If you look at this, you can tell right away exactly what it's talking about. And then this state filter events is derived state. That means it's not passed in and it's not stored locally. It is computed based on the other two pieces of state. Now I'm going to put us in a time machine for a moment and talk about what this would have looked like circa 1.12. In part because I think it's interesting to always take a step back when you think about incrementalism and see how far you can actually get in not that much time. So circa 1.12, we had a two-way binding approach that required us to make a special API for filtering arrays. So you couldn't say, oh, I want to filter an array, no problem. I already know how filter works in JavaScript, I'll just do that. You have to learn Ember's special API. So we had a two-way binding approach that required a custom API for interacting with mutable state. And that was frankly very annoying. We were reaching the limits of what implementation work we were even able to do. And then good news, React basically told us the answer to the question. So in this Road to 2.0 RFC, which I wrote in 2014, I think with Tom, there's a section that says React's virtual DOM abstraction also allows us to simplify the programming model for component-based applications. We really like these ideas, and the new HTML bars engine, which was basically Glimmer 0, landing in the next Ember release, lays the groundwork for adopting the simplified data flow model. So what does it mean? What does the simplified data flow model mean? So it does not immediately mean that it becomes very easy to repeat. But what it does mean, as of somewhere in the middle of the 2x series, is that you were able to say, I already know how filter works in JavaScript, and I'm just going to use that API, right? So there's a lot of extra stuff. There's this get events. There's this computed thing. You have to use the word function, even by the time 2.10 is out, like nobody is using the word function in any of the code anymore, right? So there's a lot of little annoyances here, but the critical thing from a data flow perspective, not an annoying application perspective, is that you are allowed to use the filter API. And even though you're making a whole new array every single time, Ember is still efficient enough to do the right thing. And again, we stole the implementation idea from that. We don't actually use a virtual DOM, but that doesn't sound bad. So the key thing is that after Glimmer 2, it became highly efficient to just write a function that filtered an array, and that just works, and that really eliminated all these weird cases where, in order to think about the right state in any way, you have to think about whole new APIs that we were having to build. And maybe if you didn't build an API yet, you're just out of luck. And I actually think this change from Glimmer 2 is really underrated, because we were getting to a point where a really common critique of Ember was, I'm just feeling stuck all the time, just working with arrays in simple ways. So even though it seems like arrays are like a very special case, it turns out there's not that many basic data structures in JavaScript. And if you're just dealing with simple data, it's not that hard. But as soon as you start dealing with arrays, it gets really hard. And there's not that many harder things than that. So basically getting to a point where you could just use your JavaScript knowledge to work with arrays, I think eliminated what I saw as the biggest challenge at the time. And I think it worked. This is just a slight detour, but after RFC 281, which removed the need to use .get, the same code, it still has this computed thing, it still has the function thing, it still has to enumerate the list of dependencies, but the code inside the function has become actually getting pretty close to what we would really like. So in the 1.x era, we had this really old, really custom filter API you have to learn. You couldn't use the normal filter thing. You had to learn this special API. In the current era, right before Octane, there's still this computed thing, but the inside of the function is getting really close. And I think even that is like a pretty nice set of things to have done incrementally. We actually still support the filter thing. If you were using it in your app right now, we still haven't deprecated it. And the fact that we were able to sort of slowly work our way towards what we have right now, and it works, and if you're building a new app today, you use it, and probably a lot of people in this room might not even remember the other API, and yet we still support it. I think that's a big victory. So that's like good progress, but like I said, there's still a lot of things that are annoying about this, and like, in my view, too annoying. There are things that are, it's like valid to be annoyed by it. I remember early on in Ember, somebody told me, like every time you, somebody tries to explain why something like this exists, I hear somebody whispering bullshit in my ear. And I don't know, that stuck with me. So we still have a little bit too much. The description of what you have to type here is a little too Ember specific. It's a little too custom. You have to remember to type these extra dependent keys, which is an error prone thing, right? That's all very annoying. But like we can do better than that. And we've been able to do better than that for a long time. So really the interesting thing, and hopefully you're seeing the pattern by now, is like how do we do better so that new code can do much better than we did that before, without breaking existing apps, without breaking existing code, giving people a migration path. And so here's the before, and that was a lot of build up to just say this point, but basically in Octane, there is only one thing you ever have to know about mutable state for the entire system, which is if you have a piece of state that you're going to mutate somewhere, put @track in front of it. You need to import it from the appropriate place, but that can be a class. It doesn't have to be a component or a model. It could be a model, it could be a component, it could be a service, it could be a random utility class that you put somewhere. All you have to do is, if you are going to have a piece of mutable state that you're going to mutate, and you want mutations that you make to show up in the DOM, that could be through getters, through functions, through whatever, you have to mark that thing as mutable. And that is, and other than that, you access, you set and get that state exactly the same way as you set or get the state if you weren't using track at all. So one way to think about that is if you erased in your mind the word track and wrote code that used it the way you would expect it to work normally, it will work perfectly. There's no leak at all in how it works. The only thing that happens is if you don't write that track in front of mutable state and you mutate it, then changes that depend on that won't get updated in the DOM. And we have a whole bunch of assertions, especially in components where it's common to try to catch your mistakes. We obviously can't catch all the places where you should have written that track because we can't see every mutation in the entire program. But for framework objects, we have assertions that try to detect that you didn't mean to forget it, right? But the important thing here is that we went from, in the beginning where Ember was extremely invasive. I would say in Ember 1.0 was extremely invasive. We had this custom filter thing. We had get and set everywhere. We had all this code that dealt with proxies. We had, every time we made a change, we had this internal feature called chain nodes that propagated everywhere that was actually quite invasive and annoying. Created things like the can't set and after destroyed errors that you've seen, right? So there are a lot of problems, things that had to do with the run loop are connected. So it just became a very invasive set of features. And after Octane, again, for new code, for code that's able to start from scratch, and I don't mean the whole app has to start from scratch. I mean, if you write a new component tomorrow and you use that track, that is the only thing you need to do to get to be able to put things that are derived from that in the DOM. So the key thing here is you just use a getter. You want to use a getter, you just use a getter. And just like we said before, this .args works. So we have this before, which is getting somewhere, but it's still not great. And after Octane, I think I feel quite good about this. And I think now is a good time to point out that if you had a mental model about incrementalism that is probably the mental model that you had or would have in your head, you probably can't predict that the bottom thing is even possible. You probably, when Angular 2 came out, we had a debate with them. Angular 2 said, the web is changing too fast, which I always found hilarious because the whole point of the web is that it does not change fast. Like, the whole point of the web is that it disagrees with this environment. The web is changing too fast. You need to reboot the entire API because otherwise it will be impossible to actually get to a point where you have a nicer system. And our position the whole time was, no, it's not impossible to do that. You can, if you know how to build it, you can build it. The hard part in the first place is just migrating people. You already gave up on that entire project. We are not going to give up on that entire project, and we're just going to do it, right? So nobody, if you wanted to use @tracks 18 months ago when I landed in the first place, you could have done that. I did it. But that's not very interesting because people don't with their apps all. People want to build apps. I like when we built Skyline, I said this app's going to be around for at least 5 years, and people don't say that. I think it's a good thing to say I'm going to build an app, and it's not like it's a long-term app. And when something is a long-term app, it actually is important for the people who are building the tools that you're using to think about how to migrate. Not big migrations, not like we said a long time ago, we want migrations to be allocatable or assignable as sprints. To be able to do these things a little at a time. I'm not going to talk about that in a minute. But we really think that we can get all the way to the end. I don't think this is a compromise API, the thing on the bottom. I think the thing on the bottom is what I would have wanted to build. And the only thing that's hard about it, the thing that's tricky, the thing that requires resources is migration. But that's actually a good thing for someone to do. That is a good idea. So far I talked about 2 features. I think those features are actually a big chunk of what people need, like limber components. So the first question is, when can you use limber components? Well, some of you might know, I have good news for you. Limber components, because Octane is not a big bang major version release, Octane is just a roll-up of a bunch of features. A lot of the things that I've talked about already are already available now. If you're using Ember 3.11, any of these things would work right now, and you can just start using them. So angle bracket syntax I've been using in my company for like 6 months, a year, something like that. You get nicer syntax. You can pass attributes instead of having to use attribute binding, right? So you forgot. You don't have to make the receiving component enumerate all the attributes. You're using Ember for a long time, you know what I mean. So that's nice. It's been out for a long time. Limber/component is actually a good example of the previous talk. It is currently just an add-on. So like Limber is an npm package, and limber/component is an npm package. It also, in addition to being an npm package, is an Ember add-on. So if you just add Limber component to your app right now, it works right now, and you can use it. It didn't ship by default in Ember yet, but because it's the whole what the previous talk was about, which is that it allows us to do experimentation. It's true both about the ecosystem and also ourselves, right? So we didn't ship a stable version of Limber component yet, but that's fine. You can just keep bumping it the way you bump any other package. I didn't talk about modifiers and can't for time, but I think they're really great, and they're out. People should use them. Native class syntax I sort of alluded to. Native class syntax has worked in some form or another for like 18 months or longer. We're now at a point where I feel really good about advocating that people use it, and that works now. There are 2 modifiers, on and fn. This also ties back to the previous talk. So on is basically better action. I think is the right way to think about it, and it exists in 3.11. So as soon as you upgrade to 3.11, you can use it. Don't worry, I'm going to talk about like how I think people should migrate in a minute. And tracked, the last thing I talked about is one place to. The benefit is you have one place to mark removable state, and everything else is just JavaScript. That is probably going to be the last feature to cross the finish line and be stable in 3.13. And once that feature lands, I think we're done. I think we're Octane is ready. So the important thing about all this is I just enumerated a big list of features. You should not think that what you should do is stop your application development and upgrade to Octane. And I will give a little more detail in a minute about how I think you should think about it. But what you should not do is think about it as a big bang upgrade that requires you to stop development for an extended period. Almost all the features, because they were already landed in an incremental way before Octane, are features that you can adopt incrementally as are appropriate. And I think it's up to your team. And like I work on a team, so I know how it is. It's up to your team to decide like when's a good time to use angle brackets. So last month, a member of my team, Kristen, decided I'm tired of having some angle brackets. So not on angle brackets, I'm just going to run the code mod and take a week or 2 and like migrate everything. And we discussed it as a team, and we thought that was a great idea. It landed. There are some bugs in the code mod, which is why Octane's not out yet. But I think she wrote this really long report afterwards that explained it, and her conclusion was, even though there are bugs in the code mod, I'm still happy I used it. It would have been more annoying to do manually. So basically, what I'm trying to say here is, don't think you have to do it all at once, but also let your team decide where the benefits are and whether they're worth it. The next thing that I want to explain is if you are going to plan to put something on your roadmap that says I want to migrate Octane or be on Octane, like what does that mean? What is the MVP of that? So the MVP of that is that there are 4 features called optional features. So Ember has a system called optional features, and those are features that are technically breaking changes, but which you opt into. And the idea is if we make every app opt into them, then we would have to make a major release, a major breaking change. But since you opted into it, it's not a breaking change. But these are changes that affect a lot of things, not just like one target thing. So you need to basically migrate all these things, and I have some advice for each one about ways to make it a little easier. But this is really the minimal core of what it means to get on Octane. So the first one is, today, Ember adds a div around the whole application that, for various reasons that I'm sure many people know, is annoying. So as of Octane, let me describe it. The application template wrapper feature, if you disable it, stops having the div appear. We can't do that for everyone because people rely on it. They have CSS that depends on it, etc. So you need to turn that off. That's one of the features. And I should also say, the reason why these features are the minimal subset for Octane is that things like the Octane generators assume that these features are flipped. So because these are like fairly systemic features, when you switch on the Octane generators, which will be on by default either 3.13 or 3.14, we are going to assume that these things are done, and if they aren't, the generators will not generate code that will work. Right? If you're an Octane code. I will say more later, and I think I will also answer questions. But to reiterate, there are 4 features here. These are the features that if you're like thinking about Octane stuff to work on, these are the features you should work on. So the first one is, if you actually care about that div, you want to disable the application template wrapper feature and add the div back. Okay. If you need a div, no problem. You can type that in your template. It's spelled opening bracket div. You don't actually need a framework to add a div. The second feature is jQuery integration. I actually noticed that a lot of people have already removed this jQuery usage in their application anyway. But of the 4, this is the one feature where we have an add-on that you can use if you really need it. And it's just that we no longer assume that this.dollar is present. Glimmer components don't have this.dollar or any jQuery integration built in, and things like the default testing generators will do the wrong thing. So if you need jQuery, you need to use the jQuery add-on, and that will just work. But I think in general, a lot of people see the benefits of taking some time to try to reduce their dependency on jQuery. Template-only Glimmer component is basically it's sort of the same thing as application template wrapper. It's saying if you have a component that's only a template and not a class, in the old version of, in the current version of Ember, classic Ember, we would generate a div for you for that component, and we would also generate a class for you. So like you would have some state like this, you could do two-way bindings, whatever. Most people aren't doing anything like that, but it definitely comes up in applications. Like there are some applications that are doing it. The easiest thing for you to do is if you have template-only components and you can't tell at a quick glance whether you if you really need a div, you can add the div, it's fine. If you need a place for some state, you have like accesses to some this dot whatever, just make the class. You don't have to have a template-only component. And if you need state, now you just make the class. And then the last one is default async observers, which is the last feature that came from making track work. And this is basically, some people have, so first of all, you probably shouldn't have observers in your application. You can help it, but we know what happens. Some people have observers that really, really rely on running inline as soon as the other property is set. That has always been bad practice, but again, we understand that people do it and it's hard to avoid. Default async observer says that we're not removing observers yet because we understand that's a feature that takes some thought to remove. But by default, if default async observers is on, observers are asynchronous by default and do not run inline. The easiest thing for you to do if you aren't sure is, even with default async observers, you can specifically ask that an observer run synchronously. However, that is now a very slow thing because for reasons that are too technically involved to get into, we no longer have to do the work that we would have to do anyway before. So now if you have a synchronous observer, every single time you change any property, we enumerate the list of all the synchronous observers and check to see if they need to run. So you basically don't want to have synchronous observers. They're pretty slow now. But it's also rare to have observers, and especially rare to have observers that need to be asynchronous, or they need to be synchronous. So they generally, what we found is that most applications can turn on this flag and everything still works. If you have a test suite or some QA process, you can check. Alternatively, if you have a few observers, it's probably not the worst thing in the world to turn on this flag and just mark them as synchronous. Like, yes, we're gonna have to do a little bit of work for each every time you change property, but it's slow, but it's not painful, and you should like, basically you'll get into being on Octane, and then you can continue iterating from it. Now, so that's what it would take to be on Octane, and with the exception of default async observers, all those flags already exist in today's Ember. So if you're like looking for stuff to do to prepare for Octane, getting your app off of those 3 flags is good. That's a good thing for you to prepare. Now, in addition to those things, which is like really what it means to be on Octane in the first place, other stuff that you can do right now with the stable version of Ember, you can start using angle brackets right now, and you can use them anywhere in any template to invoke any component, whether they were written with Glimmer or not. That was an important property of angle brackets, which felt like it would be too confusing if you have to know a lot about one of your columns. You can also start using, as of 3.11, you can start using the on instead of action. Pretty much anywhere you were using action before, you can use on now, and the syntax is like curly on, the string click, and then the function you want to call. There's a little bit more detail, but it is a very, very thoughtful placement and generally reads better. You can also create new modifiers. Again, that was the one thing I didn't have time to talk about. There are 2 add-ons right now, Ember functional modifiers and Ember O modifiers. You can decide which camp you're in and pick accordingly. But those, the Ember, as per the previous talk, modifiers right now are a low-level primitive. But good news, the community made a few higher-level add-ons that you can use to make modifiers right now. I made a modifier last week. What did it do? Had something to do with video or something like that. But basically, a modifier is you can tack a function onto any HTML. Is the idea, and have it do stuff. It's sort of analogous to React hooks, but like too many differences in details for me to really say that with a straight face. But I think it serves a similar composability and usability goal as React hooks, and those modifiers exist today. You can use native class syntax right now that includes places where you're subclassing from Ember classes, pretty much caveat-free. A near-term version of Ember is going to add a decorator called @classic for subclassing from existing Ember framework classes. That is basically just a way to tell the linter that it should warn you about some things that are in the weeds and edge cases, but which are possible gotchas. But generally speaking, it's fine to subclass from using native class syntax right now from any class, whether it's an new class or an old class. Subclassing Glimmer component is also a thing you can do. You can add an add-on to your app, like we said, and it works. The only thing that I would say there is that you really need to learn how Glimmer works, because it is really a small subset of the existing functionality. The most important thing is that modifiers are the way you do DOM now, not lifecycle hooks, and that is a big difference. So if you just like didn't think about it at all, I think it's like a small blog post to explain it. But if you didn't think about it at all and you just start trying to use it, you're going to be pretty confused. So make sure you dedicated some time to learning how it works. But it works, and the only major gotcha I would say is that the add-on is not 4.0 yet, and therefore the add-on itself may be unstable before it is included by default in Ember. But I would say that you can freeze it like any other add-on, right? Like you can lock file it. And then finally, @track, like I said, is the last feature. You can use it if you're willing to use it and put up with bugs and stability. I would say the major bugs have to do with the major bugs that are left have to do with drop. I don't even think there are many, but drop is complicated. Finally, so that's all what you do in the lead up document, which is probably in the approximately 13 year, maybe 14 if we're unlucky. So once you're on Octane, the next things that you can do are you can migrate your entire application to angle brackets, and the way you would do that is by using a code mod, and hopefully that will test you because code mods are never perfect. Migrating to on, like that's pretty easy if you've got one place for action. So if you like wander into a place that's using action, it's probably easy to migrate to on. And I don't know if we have a code mod, but we probably will. And it's also pretty easy to do mechanically. Migrating to Glimmer component. you can do that, but I would say that that's probably something that you should do manually and carefully because the programming model is pretty different. The fact that you can invoke a Glimmer component from an Ember component and a classic component from a Glimmer component and vice versa means that you don't have to worry about getting it all done all at once. What the analogy that I usually use is ES6. So just like, you know, in the beginning, after you adopted ES6, maybe you would run into a var or the function keyword or something like that, or like you would see a method that didn't have the concise syntax and say component function. And maybe right away it was a little annoying, but you were used to it. But then before long, you know, you run into it, and you're like, ah, you like feel the fire in your belly to update it. The reason why you felt the fire in your belly is because it became really obvious how to do it. Right? It was in your head, you could see how to refactor it. And so I think basically Glimmer component is the same way. I think your best bet is going to be use it for new code, work with, like, have senior and more entry-level developers pair on migrations of individual components so people get used to it. And I think, like, don't worry about it. Before long, you're going to feel like you'll feel the urge to do it, and then that's the time to do it. Once Octane shipped, migrating to Abstract is also something that you probably want to do manually and you have to get used to it. The nice thing about Track is that you have to learn how it works, but it kind of just works. So the thing that's going to be tricky is making sure that you find nice boundaries so that you're not like interleaving. You don't want to have one class that uses get insight in some places and track in other places, not because it doesn't work, but because it's confusing, right? So I think like you want to make sure you've got used to it and you do it in a reasonable way. And then last thing is if you solve the new features together, do code smile on your face. Don't feel the. I think if you're looking for ways to use the new features, feel good even if your app is not migrated to angle bracket components or not migrated to Glimmer components. I would feel just fine if you're going to build a new component, building it using all the new features all together. I think that's the best way to learn how they work. And in other words, to make sure that you are going to do a good job when you do other migrations. So, just to summarize, Octane has been a little tricky to describe because in some ways Octane is nothing at all. It's just a marketing release. What I liked about this talk, what I liked about writing it, is that now that we're very close to it, it's a lot clearer. It's a lot clearer what it is. So Octane is a bunch of features. I had a few tables that talked about those features. But more than those features, some of which have been around for a while, Octane is polish, it's documentation, it's making sure that we committed that it works in a lot of cases with a lot of legacy code. Many of us have some legacy code floating around. And it's just generally committing to a level of quality that is more appropriate for people who didn't ask for it. Right? So when somebody opts into a feature because they're excited about it, they can put up with some amount of things not working right. So when you ask them, things work well. So I think it's more of a commitment to the level of quality for the whole bundle of features that we think it works at the same level as features that have been around for a long time. And Octane is almost there. We're in the final stretches right now. We're in 3.11 now. 3.12 is the LTS release. It kind of made sense to release Octane at the same version as the LTS release. And I think many of us are hoping that will hit 3.13. We care more about the polish and quality goals than actually hitting an arbitrary specific release. So if we are getting close to the 3.13 branch point and people are still reporting bugs or we still know about major performance regressions or something like that, maybe we won't make it. But I think that's everyone really wants to. So go have some fun. I think what's awesome for me about Octane in my own apps, my own work, is that especially for new apps, the whole collection of features is so much nicer than certainly the 1x era, but even it's like noticeably nicer than what the classic Ember is. So building new features with the new Ember features feels good, feels nice, and feels fun. And like give yourself permission to do that. It's good. It's good. It's good to be able to do it in a production app, right? I think a lot of times you want to use new technology requires you to find a place that's a new app because you have to sort of abandon emotionally the app that's been working because you want to try a new thing. And I think what's awesome about Ember and Octane working is don't have to abandon the thing that's actually working for your business, for your. I actually even so people often like they want to apologize for apps that have been around for a while. You know, they want to say like somebody has to build that, and like it's like too bad that people are caught up on the shiny thing. But like there's something like good, there's something quality about apps that are sustainable, that are built well. I don't feel I should that, but Skylight, the Skylight app that I work on, I still feel extremely proud of right now. It still feels state of the art. It does not feel, it doesn't feel like we're making a lot of compromises because we're on a multiple code base or something like that. And the truth is that if you are able to continue adding new stuff and you're doing a good job, those apps work better. Those apps work better than like, oh, I guess company X has to abandon that thing, so I have to switch to company Y thing while company X is rewriting their app to React or whatever. Like that whole thing is not good. That whole thing is not. It's not just that. It's not just that. Like it is morally good for people to be able to. Like somebody has to work on those code bases. Like frowny face. I don't see it that way. Like I think all of us should feel good working on products that somebody can use for more than a year or two. Like we all use products for more than a year or two. Why do we think that when we build them we should? Why do we think we have to keep rebuilding them? What do we think is going to happen? So anyway, a lot of fun. I know I do when I use these new features, and let us know how it goes if you're going to use them before we ship, because we want to hear feedback so we can fix bugs. I guess I don't. Those were all slides. But thank you.
I think we got time for questions.
Okay, I'll take any questions. What's up?
We're to say right now here at Avalera, we're need to peel away parts of our monolithic Ember app, and we've got some shared components that just kind of wondering what we're going to need shared components for other frameworks. What are your thoughts as rewriting some components as Glimmer components and making them better?
Good question. Really good question. So first of all, I think people, you're not the only person. Yes. Repeat the question. It's going to be the. Okay. We have a big monolithic Ember app, and one of the things that we're trying to do is peel off some very common components into a separate library that we can share across multiple apps now that we've breaking it up into more than one monolithic app. How should we do that? Should we use Glimmer or web components or something like that? So good question. You're not the only person who has that problem. In particular, LinkedIn, which I do not work, but is a major sponsor of the project, very seriously has that problem. And they have decided to really bet hard on the Ember ecosystem of projects. That's actually been a fun, yet stressful thing for me because it's you know how big companies are, there's like a lot of, it's not a monolithic thing, ironically. There's a lot of little teams that look a lot like teams that aren't at the company, right? So you have a small team, you have a marketing team trying to do something. That team actually looks a lot more like the team that needs beginner-friendly tools, the team that benefits from standardization, right? And which I think a lot of big companies don't notice. And so I think we're not exactly ready if you're not really digging into Glimmer. Like if you're not working on Glimmer. I think it would be annoying to use Glimmer for the purpose you're describing. However, it's basically what Glimmer is destined to be, and probably not too far from now is. So right now, Glimmer.js was an experiment at building a thing that is kind of like Ember. If people remember the Merv days, kind of like Merv for Ember, except we built it. It uses Ember CLI. It has an application, object, whatever. And I think that we're getting Ember pretty close to that, and I think it was a good test bed. It was a good place for us to try stuff, but I think it's not. It never really worked. It never really served anybody's needs as a test bed, except for our needs as a test bed. In other words, nobody really used it as an application framework. And we're getting to a point where Ember itself is going to be pretty good. I think the next edition after Octane is going to have like embroider and other like tree shaking, code splitting improvements. So we're just going to get to a point where that project doesn't need to exist for that purpose anymore. So I think what it will end up being is build components that work in both vanilla environments and Ember. And one thing that we agreed on at the recent face-to-face that's going to be in RFC really soon is that there should be a source format, which is like a Glimmer component source format that you can write and is guaranteed by the framework to work both in vanilla context and Ember. So you could put on npm and then you can either put it in a HTML file, or it will be explicitly like a stated goal that you could also use it as a component as an Ember add-on. So that the reason why that I feel good about that story is that the LinkedIn team already has kind of an ad hoc version of that working themselves right now. That's what I meant when I said you have to know Glimmer, but they don't want to because they're sensible. They don't want to be maintaining that, and so the goal is, and I'm going to be working on it. The goal is basically to make Glimmer.js a one framework. I think we're just going to have a web component wrapper. Like I think it didn't work before for reasons, but really like boring reasons. Like we just didn't do it. But I think it makes sense that if you have something that's really designed to be dropped in all contexts, that one of the ways of doing that with web components, and it's not. It's like the easiest part of the world. So I think if you have people floating around who are like, I really think we should use web components as the generic mechanism for blah blah blah, like we think that that's fine. I think there are problems with the ideology of that. I think there are no problems with the tactics of it. So the ideology would be like we have to insist that everybody's data flow uses web components or whatever. Just like you made a Glimmer component, now you can use web component syntax to put it in a vanilla context. Sounds fine. Seems like a good idea. And I think so that is all a little future looking probably for your actual needs.
No, that's all. Just to clarify, so if you make this decision tomorrow, you make a web component and then basically deal with the wrapping part later. Or would you, that's kind of the only option. Like if you sat down and meet tomorrow, if you decide to make some web components and then deal with how to integrate with like React and Ember, it's like a later point.
You're saying, so this is not an app, this is like for example, my marketing site has a pricing calculator that maybe we use in our accounts. You're like, how would I do that? I think like what I actually do in my company today for those situations is just write it using Node.js, and like if you need to integrate with Ember, it's not actually that hard to do that. Okay. I actually think that whole technique is underrated. Like before there was web components, like I know people have made their living explaining why jQuery didn't work that well, but like come on, jQuery's on half of all the websites, it worked okay, right? And like you made a little JavaScript thing that attaches to an element and adds some API. It's a pretty easy thing to attach to React or Ember. So I don't know. I think my general feeling is like people tend to get. I want to have a good solution. I actually want to advance the state of the art here, but at some point get your job done and like writing a little JavaScript function, like make it iffy, but go get an element. Like go. What I was doing 10 years ago. It's like, frankly, how much work you have to do to be like, oh, we'll just use React, and now we'll use Webpack, and we'll figure out how to integrate it with our pipeline, and all the places where it has to be integrated. It's like, oh, and we're using Rails here, so like, how does that work? Well, I guess there's Webpack, or does it work? Well, it has some quirks. Like, basically, like, why are you doing that? If you're just like making a small component and you don't need a big thing to do it. At least that's what I do. I'm not saying that you never need a big thing. I'm just saying if you need a big thing, use a big thing. Okay, what else?
One more question. The slide with the event, you clarify, I think I followed the two examples. You had E and event.
This thing?
Yeah,
I think E, that's like, that doesn't matter.
Was that intentional because event means something?
No,
Or is that just, it could be E and E.
I think I probably should have written E on the bottom. Like, I think, no.
I just, because you said about the event.
I said that because I realized that while I was writing the talk, and then I was like, I think that probably subconsciously caused me to use E from then on.
Old habits there.
What's up?
Look pretty obvious, but track is basically replacing the computed decorator, correct?
It's yes and no. So I think that if you're a brand new Ember developer and you are able to only use Octane, then track is actually pretty different from computed. Track goes on mutable state. It goes on fields. Like it goes on event pattern here. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty fucking cool. Like, sorry, these are two different computers. I'm so this is like this is a field in JavaScript classes, and like in classic Ember, you wouldn't have said anything about that state. That's this over here, right? And now basically it's kind of flipped, right? So the track system, you say something about the state that could change, and you don't say anything about anything else. Computed is kind of like a viral thing, right? You don't say anything about the state that could change. You have to mutate with that set, which is annoying on its own. And then second, on top of having to mutate with that set, every time you consume it, every time you get it, you have to say that you're doing that, right? So that it's similar to computed in the sense that both computed and track are tracking systems. Right? Both computed and track are tracking systems. Track is a much better tracking system, and like hopefully you can use both of them in the same app, in the same class, it's fine. But so I think I would say track is a replacement for computed in the meta sense, in the sense that you might say Ember uses computed for tracking, and then Ember now uses track for tracking. Right? It doesn't, like the places where you would have written computed are not the places where you
Did I hear you correctly when you said, like you could have a whole class
Yes.
and track it, and inside it, let's say inside it's got some objects, some arrays, complicated structure. That just track on the outside at that level, anything happens inside of it.
No.
No.
You have. I should be very clear, but I think it's both cooler than you probably think right this second, and not as cool as you thought.
Okay.
So we don't have Untitled, so we can't quite do that. You have to say tracked every place. So if you have a class that has some mutable state on it, you mutate that as you write like this dot name equals new name. So you write that somewhere. That code exists in your application, and the consequence of setting a name should mean that something should update. Like if I ask you that question automatically, like, oh, if I change name, does that mean that something should be updated or not? Then you have to put that track in front of the name declaration. So, but that's like basically the reason I mentioned classes is because it doesn't have to be an Ember class. You can make a vanilla class, and you can put track stuff on it. Also, as long as you replace the whole thing. If you use React, you kind of know this story, but I think the track thing makes it less viral, right? So, but you can basically say, okay, this mutation you can just do as a mutation. But if you ever get to a point where it's too annoying to do mutations as mutations, then you can basically just replace the whole object with a functional style, and that also works. So basically, I guess what I'm saying is, if you have a complicated structure, if you update it using like the Redux style, like that update it, that's fine, that works. You don't have to then what you thought is true. You just have to put track on the outside. If you but if you have a deeply mutable structure, then it doesn't have to be a number object, but you have to say track all places of tracking or mutation. And only in places where the mutation could affect the output.
One more question. That's what's up.
What's up with decorators and TC59
Okay. I'm glad this is the last question. So let me give you the maximally charitable view. So when ES6 classes happened, I was on TC39, and I said, oh shit, I can tell that this is going to be a problem for Ember and other frameworks. This was like in 2013, 14 or something. And I was like, since it's going to be a problem for other frameworks and Ember, why don't we start working on this decorator feature? And I tried, like, I'm not gonna claim that I created the perfect design, but like, quite frankly, there is no such thing as a perfect design for anything. There's just the best thing that you can do given who we are. So anyway, what I saw clearly is that just ES6 classes with no additional annotations at all just is missing. You have to have something like track. Track, it could be the MobX Observe style, it could be the Redux Saga style. There's a lot of ways of doing what you're doing, but at some point there's a little piece of extra thing that you have to say somewhere. And so I started working on decorators. The decorator feature has been controversial in TC39 for very, very hard to pin down reasons for a very long time. And so what that meant was I said, I really need this feature to be done by the time Ember is ready to help us switch to classes, which turns out to be now in 2019. I thought that was funny fun. And so I basically, so I started working with people to figure out, like, okay, what is your objection? Your objection is, this is too dynamic, this is whatever. BA wants to optimize this thing. This person who likes functional programming is sad that we did classes in the first place, and now they're sad that we're working on this feature instead of another feature. Maybe I can help them work on the other feature. Maybe I can try to calm people's fears that we're doing in the classes. Oh, now this person said classes are getting too complicated. Maybe I can work really hard with other proposals to try to show or help reduce the complexity, whatever. So I did that for a long while, and we managed to get decorators to stage 2. What stage 2 in TC39 means is everybody agrees that this feature is going to happen, and now it is up to the details. Unfortunately, that may be the process, but we effectively have the equivalent of a Senate filibuster in TC39, which unlike the Senate is like really not good to use. And I'm kind of joking here, but you're basically allowed to object to anything at any time. So even though technically when something reaches stage 2, it means everyone agrees that this is supposed to happen, and like you should have already objected by now. And and then what happens in stage 2 is people work on the details, right? So it's like, oh, I don't need to continue convincing people to do the feature. Everybody already agreed with that. So now what I should actually work on is the details. So we did things like, should the word export appear before or after the decorators? That was an example of a detailed work. And there were several of those that were very frustrating to work on, but we worked on them because we were like, okay, we're in stage 2, seems good. We eventually got to a point where it seemed like we had run down all the details. We came back for stage 3 and effectively got objections that were a la stage 2 objections. People who were like, I don't understand the point of this feature, blah, blah, blah. People who didn't bring that up the entire time we were repeatedly, we came back to the committee basically every 2 months with updates, with information, very minimal. Oh, I was reading the chart. I'll try to summarize it in the chart for you. Anyway, we brought a lot of updates, people didn't object. We tried to bring to stage 3. Basically, some people who were like uneasy the whole time, but didn't want to rock the boat, got really uneasy, and there was some renewed energy around objecting. Unfortunately, that's like several years into the stage 2, like trying to nail down the details process, and it did not successfully get to stage 3. What that in practice means is that we're not very close to getting to stage 3. Like, I think the committee, nobody was willing to say out loud that we should not have a feature. If you ask me, I think there are people who are actually skeptical of it, and there's some work that has to be done to get them on the side of decorators. But everybody understands that there's a lot of desire for them. But I think there's going to have to be significant changes to the design. Again, I don't mind. I think it's good to make changes to designs. I just wish that the proposed changes would have been discussed at a much earlier stage. The chart, if I want to give, I have 2 things to say and then I'll wrap up. So I want to give the chart review and then I want to say what it means for everyone. I think the second one is. So the chart review is, this is literally going on for like 6 years. TC30, another thing I've been working on the whole time in TC39 is trying to make TC39 more representative of the developer community. So there's a massive, massive increase in the number of developers on the committee, which also resulted in generally more turnover on the committee. So a lot of people who are there now were just not there when stage 2 happened. Now, it's like probably reasonable, nonetheless, to either have objected earlier in the process or just say, too bad, I guess I wasn't there, and people, okay, fine. But because this feature is so controversial, and there are some of the people who have concerns are like browser vendors, there are other people who are just new, who are like, well, if there are a handful of people who are objecting and seem serious, I feel okay saying that I also have doubts that can happen. And I actually don't think there's anybody operating in extremely bad faith here. I think the critical problem is that it's both very easy to object at certain moments, like when you're going to advanced stage 3, and very, very emotionally, cognitively, psychologically painful to object when someone is giving an update, right? So if I come to the committee and say, here's an update, I actually really want you to say I am having increasing doubts about decorators, so I stop working on like, should export come before decorator and start trying to convince you that would be better. But telling me after like 5 years I have doubts is also expensive, right? So basically what happens is there's like increasing people talking amongst each other, like, this is concerning me, but there's not a good enough incentive to raise it up. So it's like very, very annoying for the champion. And I think that's my chair's review, is like, there's just not enough incentives early enough in the process. In terms of what Ember is doing about it, when we decided, so all the frameworks, we did the longest these decorators, which is ironic. But I really wanted to be good faith in the committee. I wanted to like not say, I really need to do decorators because I'm using them. Like, I did not want to be saying that. So, and I didn't want anything like that. So I said, I am going to do the right thing. We're not going to do it until we get to stage 3. But we eventually got to a point where like 6 years have passed, we really do need people to use ES6 classes. That actually matters more at this point. So when we did the decorator RFC, which is a good RFC, and it's good to read and has some of these details in it, the ones that are easy to say in public, wide cast, we said basically there's 2 options. Either TC39 will accept stage 3, in which case we're in the clear, or TC39 will not accept stage 3, and then we, the Ember project is going to have to be responsible for managing the migration to whatever happens next. So it would have been nice if we could just be like, oh, it's just the standard, so it seems good. Now it's like, unfortunately, a thing that we have to manage. The slightly good news is that it's not an Ember, it's not an Ember compiler plugin. It's in Babel, it's in TypeScript, right? So it is an ecosystem feature, which is part of what makes the whole thing frustrating in the first place. It's people could say we're not going to, we don't want to standardize it, but it is already a de facto standard. So now it's just. But basically, what we said was, if we get to a point where our back is against the wall and the choice is between continuing to ship Ember.object.extend or decorators, we're going to pick decorators, and then we're just going to take it upon ourselves to manage the migration, which is kind of like how we have to manage the Babel 5 to Babel 6 migration. And that's just where we're at. So I think from your perspective, it's a syntax, it's not a standard JavaScript syntax, but the only consequence of that is that maybe Ember 4.0 or 5.0 might have breaking changes in it, which would not have happened with the standard syntax. And if that happens, I'll code mod. Long answer.
All right,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. That's the show. Go have fun. Go build cool things.
Thank you
Thanks
very much for coming.
Thank you.